I made the decision not to invite my siblings to my wedding since none of them invited me to theirs. Among my 4 older siblings, all are married, and each had a child-free ceremony, which meant I wasn't invited. Despite being their sister, they didn't make an exception for me. The first to marry was my eldest brother Leonardo when I was 10. I understood the reason for not being invited due to his child-free wedding, yet it saddened me because I liked his bride and couldn't witness their special day. Later, Fernando, the next brother, married when I was 12. I wasn't troubled much by this exclusion, accepting it since I behaved well. My sister Beatric's wedding occurred when I was 15. She initially considered not excluding kids, but family persuaded her otherwise for convenience. Even when I asked her to consider me, given my age, she refused, claiming it would be unfair to other children. Disappointed, I expressed my frustration, only to be grounded for 6 months by our parents. By the time my youngest brother Gustavo wed when I was 17, I had grown indifferent. Anticipating another child-free event and seeing my nearly 18-year-old cousin invited while I wasn't, I barely cared. I congratulated him with a brief message and distanced myself, which angered my parents, as they expected more from me. I spent most of my time away from them, engaged with my fiancé. Now, as my wedding approaches, I have chosen not to invite any of them due to their past actions. Upon realizing they weren't invited, my siblings began questioning me in our family's group chat. Beatric inquired about possible mailing issues, while Fernando was direct about not receiving an invitation. I opted not to respond, waiting deliberately. The next day, my mom called, immediately expressing her anger and demanding explanations. I calmly reminded her they had omitted me from their weddings, believing it justified to reciprocate their actions. She paused, processing my words before accusing my fiancé of influencing me, lamenting how different I seemed, unlike the sweet person she knew. Her tendency to shift blame instead of acknowledging my perspective almost made me laugh nervously. It was my choice, Mom, and it wasn't about them. I never felt significant enough to be a part of their life's special moments. So, I didn't see why they should be part of mine. She hung up on me, which was typical. The following day, messages poured in. Leonardo sent a dramatic text saying, "Mariana, I realize you felt left out by not being invited to my wedding, but you were just a kid. It wasn't anything personal. I assumed you'd have moved past it by now." How could he possibly say that? They overlooked me during the critical events in their lives and now expected me to simply brush it off. I replied, "It's not a matter of moving past it. It's about fairness. If I wasn't deemed important enough to attend their weddings, why should they attend mine?"
Seemed fair to me.
His response was swift and even more absurd. He labeled me a spoiled brat and insisted that family should come before grudges. Suddenly, they wanted to act like close family, but where was this closeness when I was a little girl pleading to attend their weddings? Things escalated. My parents tried an intervention, showing up unannounced in my place, thinking they could sway me. Instantly, they revealed they cared more about appearances than about me. My mom asked, "Mariana, what will people think of us? Who doesn't invite their own siblings to a wedding?" She acted like I'd done something awful. Attempting again to explain it was about years of neglect, my dad cut me off, calling me childish and selfish. I lost my patience. Childish and selfish? I was just a child when I longed to go to their weddings, and everyone dismissed me as dramatic. Now, as an adult, they want to pretend it never happened. I'm sorry, but they're not coming to my wedding, and if you keep this up, neither will you. The room fell silent. Mom seemed to go pale, and Dad flushed an angry red. Without another word, they stormed out, slamming the door. In the following weeks, they accused me of being spiteful and ungrateful. My siblings tried guilt-tripping me, claiming I was tearing the family apart. Beatrice made an emotional plea, saying my nephews were thrilled about the wedding, and it was cruel to exclude them. I ignored everything. On my wedding day, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The ceremony was precisely how I envisioned, joyful, filled with love, surrounded by people who truly cared. As I danced with my husband, I realized for the first time I had control over my life. Later, I learned that Mom organized a separate dinner for my siblings on the same day as some silent protest. They found it pathetic, yet they believed they could find solace in their own way. However, this wouldn't alter the truth that I had finally stood up for myself for the first time, and that feeling was incredibly liberating. After the wedding, I hoped everything would settle into place. It seemed like a pivotal moment in my life. Surrounded by genuine love, I didn't feel anyone's absence. The flowers, the music, the food, and the people, everything was perfect.
But as always, peace didn't last.
Just a few days later, the comments began. Initially, there were indirect remarks in the family group chat. Beatric started it off, saying, "We saw some pictures of your wedding. Why did those flowers look so basic?" I tried to ignore it, but it began to irritate me. Then Fernando chimed in. "And the venue? I don't know, it seemed more like an impromptu party than a wedding. You could have asked us for help." Had he forgotten I blocked everyone from my social media? How had they seen the photos? It turned out they obtained them from mutual friends, which aggravated me even more. Not only had they intruded on a moment I deliberately excluded them from, but they were also critiquing something they hadn't experienced. I took a deep breath and restrained myself from responding, but it was difficult. The final straw was when my mom called.
She didn't bother with small talk.
Upon answering, she immediately started her critique. "Mariana, what was that wedding? I saw the pictures, and I honestly expected more. Everything looked so simple, not like your siblings' weddings. That dress, you deserve something more glamorous. Why wasn't it in a church? Your sister had something much nicer. It didn't seem fitting for our family." For a moment, I was speechless, not because I agreed, but out of shock at her rudeness. I tried to keep my temper under control, and when I finally spoke, my voice was cold. "Mom, the only thing not worthy here was you. You weren't even invited, yet feel entitled to criticize. You saw pictures of something you weren't meant to see. If you didn't like it, fine, because I didn't plan anything for your pleasure." She got angry but didn't back down. "You're being selfish, Mariana. Do you think you can just cut us out of your life? That's not normal." I couldn't contain myself. "What did you do, Mom? Let's recall. You ignored me during crucial moments of my life. I wasn't significant enough to be invited to my own siblings' weddings, yet you expect inclusion in mine as if nothing happened. That's hypocrisy. The only thing that could have ruined my wedding was your presence." There was silence. I thought she might finally understand, but no. She took a deep breath and replied with contempt. "We poured everything into you, and your response is to turn your back on us? You are leaving your family for a man you've barely known. You will come to regret this," she said before I hung up the call. I was exhausted from arguing with someone who refused to accept any fault. Unfortunately, the drama didn't end there. My siblings, propelled by my mother's influence, began bombarding me with relentless messages in our family group chat. Beatric declared, "You've torn this family apart, Mariana. Bravo on driving away everyone who ever loved you." True to form, Fernando theatrically added, "I hope that husband is worth all you've lost because of him." I read these messages quietly while my husband stayed by my side, aware of how much it hurt, but choosing not to get involved. After several minutes, I exited the group chat without responding. It just wasn't worth it. The following days were filled with private calls and messages, all of which I ignored. My mom even appeared at my door uninvited, but I did not let her in. "Mom, it's useless. All you do is criticize and demean me, and I want nothing of that in my life," I said. She continued to shout from outside, "Family is forever, Mariana. You can't just erase us because you're upset." I opened the door slightly to reply, "Family should be about support, respect, and love, not manipulation and constant criticism. If that's all you bring, then indeed, I can remove you from my life, and that's precisely what I'll do." I shut the door as she continued yelling, but I paid no mind because I had already settled on my decision. Since then, I have severed all connections. On the rare occasions they reached out, it was with further accusations and criticism, and I had no patience left for that. My current life revolves around my husband and me, centered on respect and love, something my family failed to provide. Reflecting on it, Stepping away was the best choice I've made. I have no regrets, no guilt, and I am finally at peace, living a blissful life without owing anything to those who never truly appreciated me. My life is now more tranquil and joyous than I imagined. After disconnecting from my family, I felt like I could truly breathe. My husband and I concentrated on building a life firm with love and respect, qualities absent in my past family experience. Recently, a special thing happened. I discovered I was expecting. Seeing the positive test result was overwhelming, and tears filled my eyes as my husband embraced me tightly, saying, "We will raise this baby with such love that they will never want for anything." Right from the beginning, we knew our child would only be surrounded by individuals who genuinely cared, which meant excluding my family from their life. However, news travels swiftly, and they somehow became aware of this, possibly through a distant relative or mutual contact. I initially received exchanges from my family, starting with my mother, Mariana, who messaged me, "I heard you're expecting. Regardless of our past, remember we're your relatives, and grandparents play a key role in a child's life." I chose not to respond, as my spouse and I had resolved to keep them distant from our child. This decision wasn't born out of spite, but rather out of a need to shield my child from the toxic environment I experienced throughout my life. After my mom's message, my siblings started reaching out, with Beatric typically trying to sway me. "Congrats on your pregnancy, Mariana. Despite our disputes, we are siblings, and I believe you're going to need us. We're ready to support you and the baby." Fernando, on the other hand, was blunt. "Feel free to cling to your resentment, but at least let our nephew know his extended family. He deserves that." I quietly absorbed every word while my husband, as always, remained by my side. He reassured me, "You don't need to acknowledge them. You're not indebted to anyone. This is our personal chapter, and we only need those whose affections are genuine." He spoke truly. A week later, my mother arrived at our home, uninvited. As I greeted her, her face displayed a semblance of regret. My heart twinged temporarily, yet I resisted letting it sway me. Before she could utter a word, I stated plainly, "Mom, don't persist. You're not included in my life, nor will you be in my child's." She attempted to protest. "Mariana, you can't remove us from your life. This baby belongs to our family too." I responded decisively. I refuse for my child to undergo my past experiences. They deserve an upbringing filled with sincere love, free of coercion, critique, or emotional manipulation, aspects you and the rest never provided. She began crying, but I realized it wasn't genuine remorse. Instead, it stemmed from not getting her way. Before she argued more, I shut the door. It was difficult, yet paramount. Their messages and overtures persist, but I'm unaffected now. My attention is solely on my pregnancy, my spouse, and our incoming child. We're planning this saga with immense affection and diligence, eager to embrace this forthcoming life chapter. Some might label my choice selfish, withholding family from the baby, but to me, it's about safeguarding. I reject any toxic presence near my child. Today, my decision brings peace. I am confident my child will flourish in a warm, secure home, and that satisfies every concern. My family might persist in faulting or disagreeing, but I'm indifferent. For once, I possess control over my life and the one I am about to introduce to the world, and it's invigorating.